Hi everybody, we are now live on my Facebook page. Thank you very much for joining me this evening for this extremely impromptu chat with my very good friend Rosie Bescoby. And we're going to be talking this evening about leaving lockdown and last minute tips. So you will get no judgment from me if life has got in the way and you've enjoyed the summer holidays with the kids and off work, and now suddenly the kids are getting back to school, everybody's getting back to work, and for the first time in a long time your dog is being left on their own, or possibly if you got a puppy over this period, for the first time ever they're starting to have to cope with long periods on their own. And yeah, there's been loads of tips around for a while now about leaving lockdowns coming, what should we do about our dogs? But again, like I say, no judgment from me if suddenly life gets in the way and you've got to make some changes and you're worried about your dogs really right now. So I thought I would get Rosie on for a super quick chat and to pick her brains about what are the sort of things we should be looking out for, what are the sort of things we can be doing to reduce our pets' stress, and maybe looking a little bit more towards the longer term, how can we help them cope in the longer term? So Rosie, thank you so much for joining me. I'm really grateful. I only asked you this morning, so this is amazing. So we're back to work, we're back to school. Let's start with the adult dogs who maybe have been left before, so could get used to it again. What are some of your top tips for that first time they're left and we maybe haven't prepped them?
Okay, so first of all, what I will say is my house has got kids in it. It's a noisy household when we're all home. And I think it's really common that owners are worrying about how their dogs are going to cope or how they are coping now. All of a sudden, the house is empty and quiet. The first thing I want to say is a lot of dogs out there will be breathing a huge sigh of relief right now. So don't everybody worry that, you know, this is going to be detrimental to their dog, because some dogs will be finding it a lot easier now. We're back into some sort of routine and there are periods where they can get really good, deep quality sleep when the house is empty.
They are glad to see the back of us and have some peace and quiet finally.
Frankly, they probably are, yeah. And I do say to quite a lot of owners that I see, go out, leave your dog. This is pre-lockdown. You know, sometimes actually that's the only time their dog is getting any decent rest. So whilst they are a social creature, they're a social species, and you know they should have company for a lot of the time, and some dogs need it more than others. A lot of dogs will only get really decent sleep when their owners are out of the house.
Because dogs need about 18 hours of sleep a day, don't they?
Yeah, so adult dogs, it's up to around 16 hours. And then obviously the younger and older dogs, it will be up to 20, you know, a lot of the time they should be sleeping.
Yeah,
so,
yeah. I always think that we kind of joke that cats spend all day asleep, but we often underestimate how much actually our dogs need to sleep. So leaving them in peace and is actually going to be a good thing, because a tired dog can be a grumpy dog, can't they?
Problems from chronic sleep deprivation, as we know. And often when it's it's a really busy household, the dogs can be quite overstimulated. They've always got one eye or one ear open, and they're just not getting into the deep REM sleep that they need during the day. So that's the first thing. And I think the second, there's sort of three groups of dogs here. So that's the first group of dogs. The second group of dogs are those who were always fine with the normal routine of being left pre-lockdown. They probably haven't experienced much separation over the last X amount of time. They should hopefully be fine about being left again now. But I would still recommend for those group of dogs to video them and to just check what they do when left alone. If you're at all worried about how your dog is going to cope with this change, just set up your iPad or a phone somewhere your dog can't reach it. I always have to put in that clause. Press record or FaceTime yourself if you want to watch them live, and just check what they're doing when left alone. And I would hope that those dogs who were fairly stable, they had a really secure attachment with their owner pre-lockdown, were fairly self-secure and self-confident, should still be okay. And then you've got the third group of dogs, and these are ones I'm starting to read comments on various sort of doggy social media groups where people were saying my dog was a bit iffy pre-lockdown and now they're really worried, or the dog is clearly showing signs of struggling. So those dogs were always my concern through lockdown, really. The ones that were insecure beforehand, got used to having company, people being at home, owners working from home, and now are really, really struggling with the change going back to work. So my first top tip, going back to your question, my first top tip is to record your dog, because until you can establish exactly what's going on when no one is home, you don't know where your starting point is.
Yeah. So I loved that, because we talked about that in a previous video, and I just love the idea of watching them. So if you are, so should your dog, when you leave them, sleep? Is that what we're after? Or is it okay if they get up and pace about? Is it all right if they play with their toys? Like, what are the things that would worry you seeing on a video? So
yeah, sleep is ideal, because as I said, it's a time when they could be getting quite decent sleep. But it wouldn't worry. Certainly playing with their toys wouldn't worry me. That's a sign of a pretty relaxed dog. Some dogs will watch, so they'll sit and watch out the window, or they'll sit and just watch the front door. And again, if they're doing that for hours, that's pretty exhausting from the dog's perspective, and it probably does show that the dog is really unhappy about being left on their own. If they do it for a bit and then can self-settle and take themselves off to do something else, then again, I wouldn't worry too much. The signs of concern would be pacing for the duration, pretty much, of being left on their own, excessive salivation or drooling, barking and howling and vocalizing. Again, it might be that that's in response to the postman having just been, but can they self-settle? Can they quieten themselves down after the postman has been? It doesn't carry on.
And you recording, you would miss a lot. Like, the neighbours are gonna let you know if the dog's been howling, aren't they? But if you weren't recording, you would probably miss them pacing up and down and
they can be nice signs. Yeah, exactly. Or if you haven't got neighbours, you might not even be aware they're vocalising. You know, they might show signs of destruction, and some people will, you know, just put that down to their dog chewing things, being, especially for puppies or younger dogs, they are just chewing things. But the key thing is it only happening when they are left alone? In which case, it's probably more going on there. It's probably more of a separation issue, not just a chewing issue. So the video, again, will establish what's happening in the lead up to them going to chew something, and where are they chewing? Because if it's the door handle, it's probably related to the fact you've just left out of that door. If it's their stuffed toy that they're just pulling apart, it's just probably that they're having a play, or it could be that they're just having a play. So that video is really important to see what happens before, during, and after the actual physical signs that you might notice when you get home. And the same with toileting. Is it that your dog isn't properly toilet trained, or is it that this is only happening as a real sign of distress when left alone, that the dog literally can't hold its bladder or its bowels, and is really that stressed that it's lost control of them? Or they could be scent marking. Male dogs will sometimes scent mark to reassure themselves and comfort themselves when they've been left on their own. So there's lots of things that could be going on that we're guessing unless we get that video.
Yeah, the video will tell you a lot. I think that's a really great idea. And they'll urinate as well, won't they, to self-soothe? Like, you know, when you go to the loo and you really need a wee and you have a wee and you're like, oh, thank goodness. That is a little kick of feel-good hormone, isn't it? That's your body rewarding you for doing something good. And our dogs get the same, or I've always understood, hopefully I'm right, that our dogs get the same kind of little kick if they do a little wee, they crouch, do a little wee, feel a little tiny bit better for that short period of time. But then the stress ramps up again.
Yeah, it's like that relief, isn't it? It's a tiny moment of relief. And where they urinate, so if it's on an owner's bed, that will often be because the heat of the urine will exemplify the scent from the owner where they have been lying. So it's all really relevant.
Oh, that's so interesting, because you do get that, don't you? That people are like, I went out of the house and the dog went and weed on the bed. The dog hates me and they're punishing me for leaving.
It's
I've
not.
heard that before.
Yeah, it
So
does
that's
seem
really interesting. That's really interesting.
Does always seem like the dog's trying to spite me doing it on my pillow. Yeah, it's off. There's a reason for it if we look at it from the animal's perspective.
Yeah, that's so interesting. And yes, that tip about, does it happen when you're there? So obviously young puppies will have accidents if you're not watching them for 5 minutes in the kitchen, or you might have got one of these dogs that are a big chewer and will chew anything if you turn your back. Or is it just when they're left? I think that's another really, if you haven't got the ability to video, that's really quite a key, isn't it? Do you come home to problems, or are your dogs just a problem child?
Yeah.
It's an entirely separate issue, and Rosie can help you with that. If that's we're just talking about leaving them right now.
Yeah.
And what about coming back to them? So they've been left, you come back, your house maybe isn't too much of a mess, everything seems okay. Is there any way of assessing how stressed they've been when we've been gone, by how they greet us when we get back?
Again, I think if the dog is really exuberant, bouncing off the walls, takes 10 or 15 minutes, of being really quite hyper, that's probably quite a clue, again, of that relief that they're going through at the fact that you've returned.
Overwhelming. Oh my God, you're home. Goodness.
Thank goodness you're still alive. Yeah. So that would be a clue, certainly. Yeah, I mean, again, dogs, it's normal for dogs to reunite bonds. It's normal for them to come and say hello and greet you. And I really dislike the advice that you'll often hear, which is just ignore your dog when you come home until they stop trying to say hello to you, because that's really abnormal in dogs. Yeah. As a greeting ritual. So I think it's normal for us to say hello to our dogs, but you don't want to G them up either. You just want to acknowledge them, say hi, be quite chilled yourself, and make sure you've said hello. But again, if that greeting is really quite literally in your face, I'd be suggesting set a camera up and see what happens when they're left alone. The other thing that's worth pointing out is some dogs will do the opposite of the vocalizing, the toileting, the destruction, and they will go into shutdown. So they'll quite literally, the owners will go, the dog's left on their own, and it's like the dog just goes, I literally don't know what to do with myself. I'm just going to curl up in a ball and do nothing until my person comes home. And then you might see this elaborate greeting as well. And actually a study that was done at Bristol Uni a few years ago alongside a Channel 4 TV programme actually tested the salivary cortisol levels of various dogs when they were left home alone. And for those of you watching who don't know, cortisol is the stress hormone. And they found that the dogs that were in shutdown, that just curled up asleep and didn't really move or do much, actually had the highest cortisol of all the groups of dogs. So the dogs that had a active coping strategy and would howl and bark and destroy things still had high salivary cortisol, but not as high as the group that just went into complete shutdown. Wow. And those dogs you'll often identify because owners will say, I left them a Kong or some food and they didn't touch it. They don't eat or drink anything when they're left alone. So again, that's a concern as well. It's a sign that the dog is not at all secure about being left on their own.
That's interesting, because often you will hear that, oh, my dog doesn't eat until I get home. I leave the food and as soon as I get in, they eat, but they won't eat without me there. So actually, could that be something of a sign of, if the dog doesn't eat, doesn't touch anything, that they could have had a bit of a hard time, need you to be secure? Again, it depends on what you've left them. Dogs are unlikely to get stuck into a chew, for example, because that kind of involves a social situation for dogs to be really involved in something that's quite hard work. But if you chuck a few treats down on the floor as you leave or in the dog's bed and the dog doesn't touch them, that would be a possible warning sign for me that would make me say video them when left alone and check what's going on. Yeah. So do you need to try to set up the video so you can see their eyes? Are these dogs like lying there like this?
No. Just roughly on the corner of the room where you think that they probably do just curl up and sleep, and see what's going on. And again, relative to where you've left the food as well, see whether they sniff it and eat some of it or whether they just literally the door shuts and they just go into their curl up and sleep and hope for the best.
Oh, poor things. So how can we help? Let's start with those adult dogs, whether they're stressed or not. What can we do now? We're shutting the door on them and everybody's going out to school and work and they're being left for a couple of hours, 3, 4 maybe. What are the things that we can do to help make that period nicer for them?
So you can try, you'll read all these things, won't you? Like leave the radio on, leave an item of yours scented in their bed, leave them with a Kong or a chew or something to occupy themselves. None of those are bad ideas. They're absolutely going to do no major harm. But if I just go through each of those bits of advice in turn, so the radio,
I always have some amazing insights on those like old wives' tales that you
generic tips. Yeah, so the radio thing is potentially a problem when owners start turning it on just before they leave the house to keep the dog company, because that can sometimes become a cue for the dog that they are about to be left, and they actually start to get a bit anxious when the radio is turned on. So again, it's no bad thing to help drown out external noises either for dogs that can be a little bit reactive to things outside the house. So it's sometimes good to have background noise in the house, but just make sure it's put on, or it's on when you're home most of the time anyway.
Yeah, it's not that trigger.
Yeah.
Radio's on, mum's leaving.
Yeah, so that would be one thing. For other dogs, again, that sit and react to things out of the window, shut curtains before you go. Pop up some, if they stick their head through the curtains, you might need to invest in sticking on some kind of opaque frosting that you stick on the glass like you get on bathroom windows and front doors, so the dog can't be reacting to things outside when you're gone. You can leave an item of your, dressing gown or jumper down for them. And sometimes dogs will curl up in that. It can reassure them. I always think, though, that your house in general is pretty much surrounded with your scent. So yeah. Probably neither here nor there, but it's no bad thing. And yet leaving them with an activity feeder or something to occupy themselves, again, just make sure it's not becoming a cue for separation. So make sure you give them Kongs at other times when you're not leaving them. And make sure that they are okay once their Kong has finished, because some dogs will finish their Kong, finish their food, and then start getting anxious because they've got nothing else to do. So it's just making sure, again, that they can then self-settle once they've finished their nice activity feeder.
And what about shutting them into one room? Is that, again, quite dependent on the individual? Because obviously, some people with houses on busy streets and things, the dogs are constantly at the window, aren't they, getting themselves in a big tiz? Yeah. So is it a good idea to shut them in one room and then stop them pacing and seeing things? Or is that not going to be the way? I think it really depends on the individual, doesn't it? I think it's sensible, like you say, if you've got a big bay window at the front of your house where your dog just sits the whole time, I would probably consider shutting them out or blocking visual access. However, some dogs really don't cope with confinement. So again, some people think their dogs have got separation issues, and I'll say to them, well, why don't we just see what happens when we leave them with access to the whole of the house or the whole of downstairs? And they don't have a separation problem. It was a confinement issue. So they wanted to sit on the sofa when mother's back was turned. Yeah, they just feel a bit claustrophobic shut in one room. Yeah. We call it barrier frustration. It can often lead to, a dog that's just frustrated that there's a barrier there. Yeah. So it can be a bit trial and error in that respect as to whether. One thing I will say, it's really common, and I know we've mentioned this before, for owners to say, the utility room is the dog room. That's where it's easy to clean. It's out of the way. That is the dog's room. That can be quite hard for some dogs because it's not a room that's associated with relaxation. It's not a room that's associated with company, like the kitchen or the lounge where the dog can be flopped out whilst we're home. So it sometimes can be that the room itself that you've chosen is more of the issue than a separation issue. Yeah. So really, it is just hugely dependent on the individual. And I guess we need to leave them somewhere nice to, in addition to it being a nice room, we need to leave them a nice big soft bed, don't we? Somewhere where they can really stretch out. Like I remember you telling me last time that they need a bed that they can stretch out to their full potential.
So that's one of my bugbears of crates, is when we have a crate too small for them and they can't stretch out. But yeah, absolutely, comfort, thick beds, not just one blanket on the floor. Don't be stingy. You know, really provide. I always say to people, you make it so comfy you'd want to curl up in it. And yeah, that will encourage rest and relaxation. And again, you might need to just reposition the bed. If your dog is one that just sits and looks at the door or the window when you've gone, try popping their bed there so that they're sitting in their bed, and they might sometimes just lead into going, oh, I'll just have a little lie down while I'm here in my comfy bed.
Yeah.
So yeah, placing that where the dog clearly likes to. So some dogs will sit at the top of the stairs when the owners are out to look through the door or window at the bottom. So try placing their bed there, at least make it comfy for them. And sometimes I think that can lead into them relaxing more, because their bed's associated with relaxation.
Yeah, so it's okay to work with them if you know where they want to be and that place isn't particularly problematic.
Yeah.
So it's okay for us to let them watch. I mean, I guess when you think about it, of course it is. Why would you stop them doing something they want to do? But I think a lot of the time we think, well, my reaction would be, oh gosh, you shouldn't be watching, you should be relaxing. So you're not going to sit where you want to watching the door. I'm going to make you go in the kitchen and stay there and relax. But actually, yeah, they might relax a bit better if they can kind of do two things at once.
They might. And again, it is trial and error. You might find that, you know, the dog that you actually say, let's just try you in the kitchen with your bed and see what happens, goes, oh, thank goodness you've taken that pressure off me, I can finally relax. So yeah, there is no one rule suits all. And this is what, you know, this is why we do what we do, and why generic advice on Facebook from well-meaning people is quite painful to read sometimes, because there is no one, you know, it's very specific to the individual case, and establishing what their motivation is and how to get on top of it is, you know, not that straightforward. So we've only gone through the very tip of the iceberg here on some of the general tips that I've talked about. It goes
why, you know, if you are watching this because you are worried about your dog, like, read all about it on the internet. I think I'm a big fan of people getting on the internet and educating themselves. There's some amazing sources of advice out there, and the more you understand and the more you know, the better it is. But particularly for behavioural problems, even if they're tiny or just a bit of a niggle, I completely agree with you, Rosie. Getting some professional help. It almost, I think a lot of people think, I don't need to take my dog to a psychiatrist. That's ridiculous. It's not that bad. But it's all part of training and development, isn't it? And getting that individualized, perfect for you advice and attention could make such a, you know, once you've figured it out, a couple of sessions with a behaviourist, and you've got 10 years or more maybe of a dog who doesn't destroy the kitchen, who is relaxed when you leave. So that's my PSA, because I think I talk to a lot of people and I'm like, give these guys a ring, and honestly it will make such a difference. So okay, I shall step down off my soapbox now. So we've done our adult dogs. What about these lockdown puppies? What about these guys who have been purchased during lockdown? Again, no judgment from either of us. We've both said that it wasn't a bad time in a lot of ways, was it, to get a puppy? But life has been weird for them, or not that they know, and life is about to change. So what about these youngsters? Is it the same sort of thing, or have you got any extra ideas for those babies?
So again, the first thing I want to say is that actually when you first get a new puppy, part of the priority when you get a puppy is building a relationship with them and creating a secure attachment. And so actually, in that respect, that time that people have had with their puppies is not necessarily a bad thing. But yes, like you said, if it has been quite literally 6 months where the puppy hasn't really been left on their own, then that's a lot longer than I'd normally recommend that we start doing some separation protocols. So yeah, it's probably similar advice. The videoing is definitely the same advice. And it might be that, you know, for the puppies that have been maybe purchased slightly more recently, so they're still young and you are about to embark on leaving them, I would definitely say you need to build it up so that the puppy can tolerate it. So you might need to rope in the help of dog walkers that pop in and help occupy your puppy for a little bit, or neighbours or friends or family, and establish exactly what your puppy can cope with in terms of how long they can hold their bladders for, how long their sleeping pattern might be, and try and get someone to come in sporadically throughout the day. So don't expect them to be able to do 4 or 5 hours in one go. Break that down.
Again, I know your answer is going to be, it's very individual, which of course it is, but how long, what are the average we can expect a puppy to be left? And also, I'd be really interested in your thoughts on what is acceptable for an adult dog, because obviously that is a big thing for people who work at any time of life, not just recently.
So I think if we start with adults, I think the RSPCA say 4 or 5 hours should be the maximum length of time in one go, certainly on a regular basis. Again, I think it's a bit more flexible than that. If you've got a very old dog that's sleeping a lot of the time, then you could, again, it depends. I don't want to start creating an issue where people start claiming I've said you can leave dogs for hours at a time. But yeah, I mean, again, it's just bearing in mind that they are a social species, so they should have company for most of the time. But leaving them on their own for a good sleep is also no bad thing. So yeah, I mean, personally, we have about a 4 or 5 hour rule for our dogs who don't have separation issues. That's about as long as I'm comfortable leaving them with. But everyone's different, and again, I'm not judging anyone who does leave their dogs for longer, and their dogs are fine with that. Puppies, again, it will probably depend on the individual, the age, because an 8-week-old puppy is going to be very different to a 16-week-old puppy, both in terms of their bladder control and just their experience of being left on their own. But yeah, when you're building up separation in a puppy, the aim is you want them to stay relaxed. So if they are already vocalizing, don't keep repeating what you're doing. You're just teaching the puppy that being left on its own is scary and distressing. You want them to be relaxed when you're doing it. So again, the generic advice of go out for 5 minutes, then 10 minutes, then 15 minutes. There's no point doing that if at any point as you're doing it, your puppy's just distressed the whole time. So if your puppy can stay relaxed at 5 minutes, but starts vocalizing at 10 minutes, I would do quite a lot of repetitions of anything between 2 and 8 minutes of separations until they're reliably staying settled, and build the time up from there. But the important take-home note is don't keep repeating it if they are distressed.
Yeah, and that's something that I now use in a lot of my advice. Is it's not the time, it's the stress. Yeah. But one thing, and again, I'm going to just use this public opportunity as a chance for me personally to pick your brains, is one thing that I've always understood is that dogs don't have much of a sense of the passage of time. It's more that security that you are going to return and they're okay to cope while that is. Is that right? Is that an old wives' tale that I've picked up, or is that
the same place that old wives' tale came as that fish have a 3-second memory, which I don't know where either of those came from. No, I think dogs definitely can. Yeah, they must do, because when we're building up training, dogs can cope with half an hour, but they can't cope with an hour. So they can. Length of time does matter to them. Yeah.
Right. So you see,
put that one in the bin.
Yeah, I shall. You see, but this is the thing. Like, behavioural information and our understanding of their brains and how they work is actually changing all the time, isn't it? Yeah. So we're always learning something new. So, Rosie, thank you so much. I really think I just wanted a quick whistle stop tour, because I think this is going to be super, super relevant to an awful lot of people right now, where they're looking at the dog and thinking, oh golly, we've got to leave you behind now. But what would be your sort of top 3 tips for leaving a dog? What are the things that you would leave in place for a dog when you go out and leave them behind? What are the things that would make it the best?
3 things that I always do with my dogs is comfy bed would be the first and foremost, and a bed each as well. So if you've got a multi-dog household, just because they sometimes get in bed together, I would always leave them with a bed each, just so they've got that option. I mean, mine have ridiculous number of beds each. I'm a bit of a bed addict. So really comfy bed. I would probably give them something to, I'd chuck them each a piece of food in their bed as I leave as well, just so that they are kind of stationed in their bed and not following me to the door. That's a signal to them that I am going without them, as opposed to they're coming for a walk with me. So yeah, leaving them with food is fine. Just make sure that they are also fine once the food has gone. And the third thing is I leave the radio on as background noise, but it's on all the time when we're home. So that will also lessen the distinction of owner presence versus owner absence. Just having something on, even at the telly, if it's whatever's normally on in the background of your house, you can keep that on when you go out.
Yeah, that's a really good point, isn't it? Because you're right. We go out, we click, turn all the lights off, save energy, mind the electricity bill, and then the house is quiet. And it is a very different atmosphere then, isn't it? Yeah. If you're in a busy house with kids and the radio and the telly and, you know, YouTube running on several different devices. Yeah, that's been my life recently. Yeah, I think that's a really good tip, and one I shall bank, is just to leave something on so there isn't that humongous silence.
Yeah, absolutely.
Right, now, just to completely change the subject, because we have had a couple of questions come up, and this is probably very unfair, but I think you know, we'll do our best to answer them. Is what about cats? Okay. Now, I know this is turning on a sixpence, but 2 people have now asked about leaving cats on their own, and they're worried they're going to get separation anxiety. Is that a thing? I'm not entirely sure that.
No, it is. There's been some recent research about cats can show the same separation distress. So like you said about science evolving, we know now that it's always been a suspicion, but we know now that cats can show same signs, and they do form attachments. They're not always that independent, aloof character that we make out to be.
I don't care whether you're here or whether you're not.
Yeah. So yeah, I think it's understandable, and I think, you know, they've had a warm lap to curl up on for the last 6 months. So and that's lovely that we know that cats can have that attachment, but I would probably work on building independence a little bit. So making sure that you can disassociate yourself a little bit from things like feeding time. So instead of having, and this is a big thing for me anyway, instead of having 2 big meals a day where you go and put food in the cat's bowl and they're desperate for their food, they're round your ankles meowing at you to hurry up and put it in the bowl, to spread that food out to maybe 4 or 5 small meals a day that are fed from activity feeders. So they're not associated with you. They're having to work for their food, get more stimulation and enrichment by working for their food, and in smaller meals a day. So it's less of an event that involves you, and you're a very, very important person because you're feeding.
Health-wise, that's much better for them as well. Cats are naturally nibbly feeders, little and often. You know, we've all read that diet, haven't we? Little and often will help your metabolism, but it's very true. That's particularly true for cats, actually.
Exactly. Yeah.
So a bit of so they're not so reliant on you for things. An activity feeder, maybe leave the radio on for the pussycat as well. You can get on YouTube, because I had a nurse do this with we had a cat that was hospitalized and she was worried it was getting bored. And so there are hours of birds on YouTube. You can put the YouTube on and watch birds in trees for hours. Yeah. Specifically cats.
Yes. And again, the evidence is a bit iffy, but it's worth a try, isn't it? There's no harm in doing these things. So yeah, and if your cat's into catnip, sprinkle some catnip when you go out. Again, leave your scented comfy jumper out for them to curl up in. Leave some novel little toys. If your cat's, you know, motivated to play by themselves, get some novel toys that only come out when you're about to leave. Little search games around the house. So again, I'm a fan of hiding bits of food, kibble dotted around the house for the cat to go and search for whilst you're out. So there's lots of things that we could do to help cats as well.
Yeah, that's really interesting. So the dogs, we kind of want them to chill, but maybe for the cats who are a bit over attached, we need to take that crazy cat brain and redirect it onto something else, because they're good at chilling, but maybe they just need to stop you can imagine a cat overthinking it, actually, can't you? Sort of overthinking things. Yeah. Cats are so like children. You can have a house full of toys and they will ignore every single one and play with the cardboard box. Yeah. And again, it's another tip that I give a lot of people is take all those toys, put them away and bring new ones out every day, especially if, you know, if I'm talking to someone about getting the cat to lose weight and stuff like that and getting them to play. You're right, that word is novelty. They like new things, and then we'll ignore them, take them away for a few days and replace. So you don't have to buy loads of expensive toys, but you could, you know, if you want to assuage your guilt at leaving them. Rosie, thank you so much. And I'm sorry I put some cats on you at the end. But, yeah, I hope you guys are all okay out there, and looking forward to getting back to normal life and back to school. I cannot wait. I'm so ready for it. But, you know, this is going to be a bit of a big change for a lot of our pets, but hopefully Rosie is a genius and given us loads of brilliant tips on how to cope and how to get our dogs through this period. But they are adaptable, aren't they, Rosie? They are very good at changes and differences, and you know, and they'll soon figure out this new life. And
if they were fine before, I'm pretty confident most will be fine again. So,
awesome. Rosie, thank you so much for joining me this evening. Thanks everybody for watching. If you've got any ideas or any questions that you want to ask that you'd like either myself or Rosie to answer, or anyone else that you'd like me to chat to, please just pop it down in the comments. I really enjoy doing these, and I personally always learn something new, so I particularly like doing it just for that, even if nobody watches. So that's great. Thank you so much, guys. Good night.
Bye.